Ever thought about how ancient people saw their world fitting together? Like where did everyone come from? Especially after like a huge world-changing event. Well, that's what we're getting into today. We're doing a deep dive into this really foundational text. It's basically an ancient family tree, a sort of map from Genesis chapter 10. People often call it the Table of Nations. Our mission really is to unpack this incredible list. It's got names, places, but it's more than that. It's like an ancient framework. It shows how they understood, humanity spreading out, different peoples forming, nations emerging, all after this big flood event. This isn't just dusty history. It's about these core stories that shaped how people viewed themselves and everyone else. So as we dive in, what's the first thing that jumps out about how this text, organizes everything after the flood?
That's a great place to start. The key thing is how systematic it is. This table of nations, it lays out the descendants of Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Their sons were born after the flood, and the text presents this as the root, basically, of all the nations that came later. But what's really crucial is the organizing idea. It says the nations spread out by their clans within their nations, each with its own language, and in their territories. So that structure, it's not random. It's a deliberate way to map the world they knew based on family ties and where people lived.
Fascinating. So it's a blueprint, almost, not just a list. Okay, let's kick off with the first main branch here, the Japhethites. The text lists sons like Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, Tiras, quite a few. And then it drills down a bit, right? Gomer's sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarmah. And from Javan's line, we get Elisha, Tarshish, the Kittites, the Rodanites. What stands out to you about this Japhethite group? Anything specific in how they're described?
Well, what's particularly interesting with the Japhethites, especially Javan's line, is this specific detail. The text says, from these, the maritime people spread out into their territories. Now, that's not just genealogy. That little note about maritime peoples, it hints at something more, like seafaring, maybe, or just major coastal expansion. It suggests the writers knew about these groups moving across seas along coastlines. It kind of tells us how they pictured the reach of these particular peoples, who often get linked, in later traditions, with folks north and west of the Near East, maybe even towards Europe.
That is a powerful detail. Really paints a picture of ancient movement. Okay, let's move on. Next up are the Hamites. This is a line often linked with peoples in Africa and parts of the Near East, south and west, maybe. The main sons listed are Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. And if we look at Cush's descendants, we see names like Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabteka, and Rama's sons, Sheba and Dedan. But then here's where it gets really interesting. Cush is also the father of Nimrod. The text doesn't just list him, it calls him a mighty warrior on the earth. And it really hammers this point home, saying he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. It even says that's why people use the phrase, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. His kingdom, it says, started in Mesopotamia, places like Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, Calneh, and Shinar. And then it says he expanded. From that land, he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Kala, and Rezin, which is the great city. So that's a lot of detail for one person in this list.
Yeah.
Why do you think Nimrod gets such a spotlight, not just as an ancestor, but as this empire builder?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's something people have definitely noticed and thought about quite a bit. Nimrod really does stand out. He's not just another name on the list. He's shown as a founder, building cities, kingdoms. That's pretty unique in this table. This focus probably tells us something about the world of people who first heard this text, their historical understanding, their geopolitical reality. Nimrod seems to represent, the rise of organized power, early empires, especially in Mesopotamia, which was hugely important. So including him with all these specifics about his cities and his might, it suggests he was seen as this really foundational figure. In terms of civilization, maybe, centralized power, different from just tribes spreading out.
Right, so it's like a snapshot of early state formation embedded in the genealogy. Okay, staying with the Hamitic line. From Egypt, we get these other groups, Ludites, Anamites, Naphtalites, Pathrusites, Casluhites, Caphtorites. And here's a really direct link you might recognize the Philistines. The text explicitly says they came from the Casluhites, descendants of Egypt. That's quite specific. Then there's Canaan, a big list of descendants here. Sidon, his firstborn, then the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, on and on. Arvadites, Semarites, Hamathites. And the text even maps out where the Canaanite clans spread, from Sidon toward Gerar as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lastasha. Well, yeah, that's like a detailed ancient map right there. Which brings us back to that question you raised earlier. Why so much detail for the Semitic branch? Especially Nimrod and the Canaanite cities, kings, these precise borders, much more than the others seem to get.
That's a critical point, yeah.
Yeah.
The level of detail, the specificity for the Hamitic lines, Nimrod's kingdom, Canaan's boundaries, it strongly suggests these groups were particularly relevant to the text's original audience. It's very likely these were the peoples the ancient Israelites had direct, significant contact with. Historically, politically, culturally, the Canaanites, for example, were already living in the land that became Israel. So mapping out their territory in such detail, that would have been a practical map, sure, but also an ideological one. Marking out areas that mattered, areas of conflict or settlement from their perspective, gives the whole thing a very tangible, real-world anchor, connecting it to their own history and geography.
That makes a lot of sense. It grounds it in their lived reality. Okay, finally, let's shift to the third big branch, the Semites. The text introduces Shem, noting he's Japheth's older brother, and calls him the ancestor of all the sons of Eber, end quote. This line is often connected to peoples in Mesopotamia, the Arabian Peninsula, and importantly, it includes the ancestral line leading to the Hebrews, Shem's direct sons, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. From Aram we get Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshech. Then if we follow Arphaxad's line, he's the father of Shelah, who's the father of Eber, and Eber had two sons, Peleg and Joktan. Now here's another one of those really interesting little notes about Peleg. It says, one was named Peleg because in his time the earth was divided. Just like that, a side note. What's the thinking behind that detail? It sounds pretty significant.
Oh, it's hugely significant. That little comment about Peleg, it marks a really key moment in this ancient worldview. The earth was divided. What does that mean? Well, it could be literal geography, maybe some ancient memory or allegory of continents shifting, but it's more often understood as the division of languages and peoples, the scattering of humanity across the globe. It basically gives a reason, an origin point within the family tree for why there are so many different languages and nations. It ties that diversity back to this specific person, Peleg. And then you have his brother, Joktan. He has this huge list of sons, Almadad, Shelef, Hazmarveth, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla. Lots of them. These names are often linked to tribes in Arabia, and again, the text gives us a location. Their settlements stretch from Mesha towards Safar in the eastern hill country. So what's really fascinating is how the text weaves together individuals, these specific names, with vast regions. It shows this early structured way of understanding the world, connecting even distant lands and peoples back to a shared, traceable ancestry. And that really ties it all up, doesn't it? The text concludes with a summary that sort of restates the whole point. It says, "These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood." Well, it's offering this comprehensive map brief, yes, but comprehensive of the world as they understood it, all seen through the lens of ancestry. A systematic organizing principle for the known world. It's quite remarkable, really, a foundational piece for ancient ethnography.
So, thinking about this whole deep dive, what does it mean for you listening right now? Well, this table of nations, it's clearly not just some dusty old list. It's an ancient and actually quite sophisticated way of thinking about human origins, how people spread out, how different cultures and languages maybe came to be. And we've seen these threads connecting to known history, right? Peoples like the Philistines, empire builders like Nimrod, all sketched out in this one foundational text. It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it.
Exactly. It really underscores this deep, enduring human impulse we have to trace our roots, to figure out how we all connect. It's a potent reminder that even these very ancient stories hold profound ideas about migration, settlement, and identity. It's not just about what they thought happened, but how they constructed their understanding of the world and, their place in it all.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. In our modern world, which often feels so divided, so complex, how might understanding an ancient table of nations like this idea of a structured shared ancestry, how might that shape how we think about people and cultures today? Our interconnectedness, even across vast stretches of time. Does looking at an ancient framework for identity and belonging change how we see ourselves and others now? Something to think about